Welcome back to the Faith Forward podcast. John Ackerman, Brian Bales, and we're in this second week on the series of celebration. And so if you were with us last week, we talked very broadly about the necessity of celebration as a whole. And this week we're going to dig a little bit more specifically into the topic of just Sabbath. So do you want to give people a quick recap?
Sure, yeah. So last week it was this idea of creating remembering moments to celebrate God, right? And those are more sort of what I would like to say ad hoc moments, right? And I don't want to downplay them, right? But those tend to be not based off a rhythm. We need a rhythm of doing those ad hoc moments. Sabbath is actually creating a rhythm of celebration in your week, almost in some ways. Talk about it. Because I know for me, when I first encountered this idea that someone would talk about Sabbath, I had a very myopic, small piece of the pie, whatever you want to say, view of it. And rarely, and I don't know if I ever thought about it through this rhythm of celebration. Yeah. Right? And so when we introduced it, maybe on Sunday, this was the first time you've ever heard someone talk about Sabbath. Truthfully, I believe this may be only the second time in 25 years, maybe I've done a message on Sabbath. And I can tell you that what it looks like at year 25 was a whole lot different than how I talked about it years ago. So I don't even know if that last message counted. I mean, Jesus uses stuff, but I don't see much about it I probably would have used going back. Yeah. But so what we're doing is introducing this idea that Scripture talks about this idea of Sabbath rest. And it's instituted in the Old Testament. Strangely enough, it is the only command that isn't almost verbatim repeated in the New Testament, but it is modeled in the New Testament. And the basis of the command to Sabbath is looking at, number one, the redemption that Jesus Christ has given us and celebrating Him, and also the reflection on the glory and the goodness and the greatness of God. You know, John, you put this definition down here on the paper, and I loved it. It's this recurring, beautiful interruption for just the sake of celebrating and delighting. And we're focusing on God. It's this current. And so remember, we've been talking about this idea of rhythms or cadences in our life, which is why we're talking about Sabbath. Because if we're not careful, remembrance stones, which are celebrating, they're all great things, just become something that happens every once in a while. And instead, we need to be a part of this. And so we spent some time first, and a lot of this was for me, because when I first started engaging Sabbath, there was a lot of things that I had to deconstruct around my misunderstanding. Yeah. And so you may have zero misunderstanding about what Sabbath is. That's awesome. My guess is if you have zero misunderstanding, only one of two things have occurred. One, you've never heard anyone talk about it. Or two, you spent some time, like John and I, trying to work through this idea. Yeah. But most people that, at least when I first engaged about the Sabbath, have some ideas about it that they may never not know where they got it from. Yeah. But there are things like, well, Sabbath means doing nothing. It's when you're bored, or only people who like are weak and need a break need that. Right. Or this sort of legalistic thing like, well, it's Sabbath day, so I don't do this, or I don't do this, or I don't do this, not because there's anything other than this particular day on the calendar. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is try to develop a healthy understanding of what this rhythm of celebration looks like through this concept of Sabbath. And what it does, as I said last week, I have to tell you, this isn't original with me, especially this first statement. Dan Allender, which John and his lovely wife Brooke sent me a podcast where he talked about it, was super helpful in just processing it differently, is that it definitely challenges our narcissism. Mm-hmm. Most of us say we're not God, and most would say we're not even a good God, right? But we play one all the time. Yep. And when we understand that job description has already been filled by someone who's eminently more qualified than us, and we listen and obey, it helps us understand the world isn't about us. It also lets us know and trust in the fact that we don't have to be self-sufficient, that it defies the way the world works, that God says that I will accomplish in your life in 6 days or less what the world needs 7 to do. Yeah. It takes this idea of trust. And I talked a little bit about that, specifically when it first came out in the Old Testament, when they were told, and I always get this word wrong, subsistence or sustenance is not the right word.
Oh, subsistence.
Subsistence, thank you. There you go. When he wrote this back in Exodus chapter 20, right, they had to live daily by farming. Right? Yeah. Right? And so that's the reason why he said stop working. That's why he said, you've got to trust me with your life on that seventh day. And so it's not so much about stop farming, stop this. It's how are you trusting God with your life and allowing Him to reform you and sit in defiance of the way the world works? Because when we do it, when we walk in it, it allows us to be transformed, it allows us to be refreshed, and it allows us to sort of, as I said Sunday, relish in the awesomeness of God, right? That He does that. So that's it. And one of the things that I mentioned on Sunday that I repeat here is that hopefully I encourage you to come, and you're here listening because of what I said on Sunday. If you haven't listened to Sunday, go back.
Yeah.
But John and I, to this one, we're going to kind of like, I don't want workshop this a little bit. Maybe that's the term I'm looking for.
Sure.
I couldn't say substance early either. So workshop maybe not be the right term. But the point of this is that on any given Sunday, right, there are some things that, where did Scripture come from? What's it saying and what it's not? And we rarely, if ever, get enough time to dig into some of that. We're going to talk about some more of what we didn't get to in a couple weeks, what we didn't get to last Sunday in a couple weeks. But we thought we'd kind of walk through it a little bit more here. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for hanging with that somewhat long introduction.
Yeah. So, as we've been going through these 7 rhythms, and there's still a couple more to come as we get into the fall, one of the most important things that we need to focus on is that we need to do this. We don't just need to learn it. We don't just need to understand it, though that's part of the process, right? It's tough to do things that you don't have at least a basic understanding of. But if we only ever learn and acquire understanding and never actually implement, then we're missing the point. And more importantly, we're missing the opportunity to be transformed.
And I would like to submit that only having it in our head, we never test out whether we're truly understanding until we do it.
Exactly.
Because there was no one in Scripture that probably had more head knowledge than the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, or the scribes. Yeah. But they weren't living it. And so there was never this true test between what they thought they were understanding from Scripture and living it out. And that's one of the ways that Scripture is designed to show the truth about God as we lived out. And also, not doesn't it show the truth about God, many times what it shows the truth that we believe that's not true about God. I don't say that right, but what we believe that's not true about God when we try to live it out. So subsistence. I'm going to keep going back to that.
Subsistence.
I'm going to get it right eventually. Subsistence. Okay.
So that's probably the most important takeaway from today is however much you feel like you understand or don't understand Sabbath, start. And we could probably just end the podcast there, though that wouldn't be as helpful as we hope to be in the rest of this episode. But that is the most important takeaway, is that as we talked last week about the rhythm of celebration, the most important thing to do is start. Whether it's with the remembrance stones that we used in the service, or going home and realizing there are some things that we need to commemorate. Right? Start. That's where we find the transformation, is in the doing. And so as we talk today, we're just going to offer some stories about where we've not done this well, where we've not understood it well, and how that not understanding it well has affected our ability to do it well, because that plays a role. But more importantly, it's sometimes really difficult to start something without seeing it modeled. And if you think about the way that you've learned most of the things that you know how to do, it was because somebody modeled it for you. Whether it was, content that you were learning in school, whether it was informational, whether it was linguistic, right? Somebody said, this is how you do the thing. This is how you draw the thing. This is how you say the word. This is how you drive a car, right? This is how you use a tool. Right? Somebody showed you, and you began to model yourself off of that before then discovering what it would look like for you. Yeah. And so not because we're fantastic models, but because sometimes it's just helpful to hear how anyone has begun to do something that you feel, I don't know how to do this at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you should talk about modeling. It struck me again, this idea that one of the things we're kind of processing is what are our early life stories, our early experiences, idea of Sabbath. And the truth is that everything is being modeled all the time. Yep. It's just what we're modeling. Yeah. Right. So when we talk about modeling, some of the modeling that I had in my life, no one ever intentionally modeled this for me. But that was that reality, that statement that you have heard lots of times, is that many times much more is caught than taught. Right. One of my greatest examples of caught than taught was when my son, he was 2.5 years old, something like that. We pulled up to a light, and he looked over out of the back seat and saw a Starbucks. And he said this, "Mom, tall, no fat, no water, extra whip, chai," something like that. A 2.5 does not order that, right? My wife did not teach him, but let me just tell you, she had modeled that chai order enough that my 2.5-year-old could recognize a Starbucks, see the logo, and give the name. Without even trying. And so there's some things in that analogy that as I was younger, and I grew up in church, I'm a pastor's kid, and no offense, Dad, I don't remember, I don't have a good memory sometimes, anytime we actually talked about Sabbath. And so either because of that lack of memory or lack of teaching or whatever it was, what I tended to do in that analogy is to see this idea of remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as is given in Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5, as sort of the Starbucks logo, and I would just regurgitate what I felt was modeled, whether or not that was accurate.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of things. When I thought about Sabbath, I thought specifically about Sunday in a specific amount of time. I also thought about Sabbath as the nap or the quiet time we were required on Sunday, because we went on Sunday morning and Sunday night, and in our home, my dad needed a break. I need a break on Sundays. I take a nap, try to almost every Sunday if I can get one. But it was required growing up in our house, right? You either had to take the nap or just be quiet, right? Kind of some ways in our house that way still today. And so I thought about that through this concept of Sabbath is really about a particular time on a particular day for when you are tired. By the way, Sabbath can be about a particular time on a particular day for when you are tired. But that is an expression of Sabbath. That is not the heart of Sabbath. And so those are some of the things that I guess for me, that's what I thought. If you would have said, what's Sabbath? And you'd ask the 20-year-old me or the 15-year-old me or whatever it might be, those are types of things I'd express.
Yeah. And for me, I had no framework for this. I didn't see it modeled because it wasn't a category. I didn't grow up in the church. I grew up attending church loosely, but it never followed me home or anybody else in my family. We tried to be good people and do good things, but it wasn't core to who we were and what we did. And so other than memorizing it as part of the 10 Commandments for some Sunday school class, it wasn't on my radar at all. And it wasn't on the radar for anybody nobody talked about Sabbath that I can recall for the first 20 some odd years of my life. In fact, I didn't really encounter the idea of Sabbath until about 3 years ago in any sort of meaningful way. And so this has been an incredibly disruptive addition to my life that's also been incredibly valuable. But it's been a short learning curve for me.
And I think a lot of us have, and I mentioned this on Sunday, that truthfully that there was a very long time in my life, and I still struggle with it, so I've not arrived in any way, shape, or form, that I sort of wore my busyness as a merit badge.
Yep.
And if you ask someone, how's your day been? Rarely, if they've been relaxed and not doing much or just chilling or whatever it might be, they're not going to talk about that. Rarely, but more often you'll see people talk about how busy they are. I got this, and this, almost as a justification for whatever is happening in that conversation. Because if I'm not busy, I must be lazy. Or if I'm not busy, I must be underworking, or I should feel guilty. And that isn't the case. And so for me, as I saw it taught and modeled, it created some things that even on Sunday I was trying to go back to and say, this doesn't work. That's not. So for me, as a younger kid, I'm really still angry at my younger self about all the naps I didn't take when I was supposed to take them, right? Now there's times, man, I wish I had a nap. But for me, I kind of thought that Sabbath was designed to be boring. I never came out that, but that was a boring time.
Sure.
Like if I got a 12-year-old son, I got to work through this with him, but he hates to be bored, right? So if you tell him, go to your room, don't do anything, right? Which is what I felt I was being told.
Right.
That wasn't really what I was being told. That's what I felt I was being told.
Right.
So this idea of boring, or that it's a call to do nothing. And by nothing, I would say nothing that I would have perceived as productive.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's not what Sabbath is. It's not a call to do nothing. It's a call to make sure that our focus is on the dependence of God in our life. And so you might be able to do things on Sabbath. Here's an example. I love to mow my lawn. If I'm mowing my lawn on Sabbath to worship God and connect with Him, there's not a thing wrong with that. If I'm mowing my lawn because I'm looking at my schedule and I think to myself, this is the only time I can get it in because it's going to rain on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and so I've got to shove it in because it has to be productive instead of time with God, well, then I'm doing the same thing. But I would like to submit, that's the interesting thing about Sabbath, because it's about the heart. I didn't Sabbath at all in that way. So because I wasn't trusting in God. I was trusting in what I needed to do. And that's the interesting thing, at least for me, and John, maybe yours is different, and I don't know about you as you're listening. The thing about Sabbath so much is, it goes back to the heart.
It does. Over
and over again. All of these rhythms do. Serving particularly, we talked about, it goes back to the heart. You could do something, a right thing for a wrong reason, if that makes sense. Sabbath is the same thing. It's not simple as just do, because then it becomes a religious spirit of legalism. And that's the other thing I walked through that really had become for me, that I wasn't Sabbathing anymore or celebrating God anymore on this time than I was another time. I was just checking a box, disengaging the worship aspect of my mind. I never would have framed it that way back in the day, but sometimes 2020 hindsight in that way. And so for me now, it's really one of those things. How do I, even as a person who intellectually knows that this is not what Sabbath is, how do I really get out of that? And that goes back to what you said earlier on. You got to do it.
You got to do it.
Because once you begin to do it, some of those old ideas or wrong ideas, then they just start crumbling away.
Yeah. They come out in the wash once you start doing it.
Yeah.
And so again, if we bring it back to this idea that Sabbath is a recurring, beautiful interruption in your weekly routine, simply for the sake of celebrating and delighting. You know, you mentioned mowing the lawn. That's one of the first stories that I remember hearing from someone who was teaching me about Sabbath. And he was telling the story because it was the category where he first experienced the disruption of Sabbath from somebody that taught him. And so it's just funny for me, the passing down of Sabbath understanding through lawn mowing.
Maybe there's a whole little sub-book for that somewhere.
Yeah. So the guy that taught me was telling about one of his early experiences of being disrupted in this category, because he was going to an older guy's house who was sort of a spiritual mentor to him. And he pulls up in the guy's driveway, and the guy's out in his little riding mower. And the guy's like doing all these like weird passes in his yard. Like not the neat orderly rows and not the Argyle diamond crisscross thing. Like there's like just random circles in the yard and these random swoops. And he gets out of the car and he sees his older friend riding around. And the guy gives him like this most enthusiastic wave and finishes up what he was doing, steps off the mower, shuts it down. And my buddy was like, "What are you doing?" And the older man who just got off the mower said, "I'm playing. I'm playing." And it was this incredibly beautiful, disruptive. Like he wasn't mowing the lawn because it had to get done, and he wasn't mowing it efficiently. It was taking him twice as long as it could have if he was just back and forth straight lines. But he was having fun. You know,
some things you're telling that story, and I began to just kind of process through this, an idol we've made out of efficiency.
Yeah.
That if it's efficient, it must be better than if it's not efficient.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really, what I would like to say, very vague understanding of worship, because there's a whole lot about worship by definition that lacks efficiency.
Yeah.
You know, we go back to, I think we were just talking about last week or the week before about when that perfume was broken on Jesus and served him, right? There was nothing efficient about that. There was nothing from a standpoint of return on investment about that. And so it may be this sort of reminder that kingdom ethics don't look like ours all the time.
Yeah.
Right? In efficiency, there's nothing wrong with it, but if all of a sudden we put efficiency over worship, we've got some issues. And some of us struggle because we feel like if we're not being efficient, we're being wasteful.
Yep.
Or we're not being productive, and that's sort of a view and insight to our heart in some ways.
Yeah. And so again, if we look back at the very first day of Sabbath, right? 6 days of creation, the last of which results in Adam and Eve, the first Sabbath, there's nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, a little bit's left to the imagination of what that first Sabbath would have looked like. But there is this beautiful garden to explore. And what would Sabbath have looked like? I mean, did they just, sit in the grass and meditatively stare at all of it for 24 hours until God said, okay, get to work, right? It seems like it probably would have involved some wandering through it and just exclaiming over, oh my gosh, look at that. That's incredible. I can't wait to see that again, or engage, go swim in that, or go climb that, or right. It wasn't okay, so do you see that on Monday? This is what you're going to do. And on Tuesday, see this over, right? Like there was just exclaiming over beauty. There was delighting in. It had to feel almost playful.
Yeah.
It had to feel like I get to, like it had to feel very childlike. Like the first day of your life, if you could have been born as a conscious being who was very aware. So like if you were born as 10, like your first day of life got to be Christmas morning. Right? That's the idea of Sabbath. That's where we're trying to take this, is that Sabbath is a day of delight and awe and reverence.
And it's not because you're tired.
Right.
Because the model for Sabbath is God himself.
Yeah.
It says he rested, and that was one of the misunderstandings. When I heard the term rest,
God's tired.
I translated that as he needed a break.
Yeah.
Now, when I thought through it, I knew differently. But when God rested, it means ceasing of doing that what he was doing to do something else. Yeah. Right? It doesn't mean he needed a break. Mm-hmm. He doesn't. He doesn't tire. He doesn't wear out. And aren't we grateful? Yeah. Right? The old joke about my guardian angel's really tired if they tire out for what they do. But, that's not what it is at all. And so God himself, in my imagination, Adam and Eve were hanging out with God.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
In that environment, spending time, appreciate that. And so I think, for all of us, it's this a little bit of a step growing and learning and beginning to appreciate maybe Sabbath, appreciate that celebration, the beauty, and the things with it in a way that's growing a little bit over time. Or that's our hope as you step into it and practice it.
So one of the fun things that I like to do for Sabbath, and again, this always, it brings me right up to the line of, okay, but can I, I'm going to be a little bit efficient today. Mm-hmm. God brought us to this place where we have this old farmhouse and 5 acres, and there's so much to do. There is no shortage of things to do, both to the house and to the property. One of my favorite Sabbath things to do is to just walk the circumference of our 5 acres, which doesn't take a ton of time. It's a 15-minute walk, tops. And to, as best as I can, resist the temptation to, okay, I still got to get to that. I still got to get to that. But to truly, with as best as I can control my vision, to look at things and just go, I love this place and this is amazing. To look at, there's this old sycamore tree in the back corner of our property, like the cool white bark, and it's the tallest tree on the property. And as part of my circle, I walk past it and I go, I love this tree. I love that it was here when we moved here. I didn't have to do anything to bring it here. It's just a cool look. It's a cool old looking tree. Yeah. And I love it. And I turn the corner past that and I walk back through like the brushy, barely managed part of our property. And there's all of these autumn olive trees. And they're kind of a nuisance because they propagate so quickly.
I don't even know what an autumn olive tree is. I'm going to have to ask him.
But it's this beautiful, like greenish color. Gives off a little bit of an aroma. And as much as I know that someday I'm going to need to cut back a fair amount of this because it's so invasive, that in those moments, it's just pretty. And you hear the sound coming through the leaves. And it can all the rest of the world goes away because I can't see anything else man-made from that part of my property. Yeah. And it just feels like I'm in the middle of nature.
And as you're talking about that, some of us may go, okay, well, what do you do for the rest of the 23 hours and 45 minutes of your day? And that's the other thing we had to get out of. When we talk about this idea of Sabbath, it's about creating rhythm. It isn't about the legalism of a whole day. Right? The truth is we need to take Sabbath moments throughout each day. Yes. And so for me, one of the things I've been doing, if I'm home, right? Because it only works if I'm home, and it rains. You can find me stopping almost anything I do and going out on the front porch, right? And putting my phone aside and just watching the rain. It's this moment where I feel like I'm connecting with God, and I flat out love it. Yeah. I don't know why I love it. I just know that it's that moment. And so one of those Sabbath, as I was kind of thinking like in my rhythms I do, like it will be. It can even be Tuesday. Those of you that know me, Tuesday is my pretty legalistic, to use that term, day for wanting to work on Sunday. But if it's raining, even on Tuesday, I'm like, all right, it'll get back to that, right? Yeah. And what happens, believe it or not, even what happens on Tuesday, is that God shows up, and when I'm done coming back, many, many times, what he wants to do with me through the text I'm studying or whatever it might be actually is increased. Yeah. Because I've spent time just in awe of the beauty and all of that. Yeah. And so don't even, I guess what I want you to hear us is that if you're like me, it'd be really easy to say, okay, great. Well, that's 15 minutes. Right. Maybe you walk it twice. That's 30. What am I going to do the rest of the day?
Well, and so one of the things that I feel like God's been inviting me into recently, I heard a pastor, teach on this topic of Sabbath. And one of the things that he challenged me with was this phrase that Sabbath is more than a day, but it's not less than a day.
Expand on that.
So it was the idea that there is absolutely the rhythm of Sabbath, finding Sabbath moments so that we're not just packing it into whatever your Sabbath day is, right? Because you work on Sunday. So having
only
Sunday
day a week,
has to
according
be
to some
Sabbath,
people. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Sunday has to be Sabbath. No, it doesn't. But one day a week needs to be your day of Sabbath, right? That we still need to abide by the idea that God can provide for us in 6 days, whatever that livelihood looks like. And so the thing that's challenged me is I feel like I've gotten really good at Sabbath moments throughout the week. I am not good yet at giving over an entire day to Sabbath. But again, it's, okay, well, what, you're just going to walk your property for 20 minutes? No, because there's other things that I've learned that go into Sabbath for me. There was another guy that I heard teach on this that heard this from an old rabbi, that if you work with your body, really healthy Sabbath comes when you Sabbath with your mind. If you work with your mind, really healthy Sabbath is Sabbathing with your body. So much of our work is mental. Right? It's figuring out what to say and how to say it. It's engaging with people and hearing their heart and sharing ours. It's a lot of sitting. I do so much sitting now compared to when I was a classroom teacher and I was constantly running around a classroom. And so I need to Sabbath with my body. And so one of the most reverential things that I can do is to take my body outside and split firewood. Right? Something mindless that works my muscles and actually clears my head. If I sit after a full week of mentally and emotionally draining work and my Sabbath is sitting on the couch and reading a book, I don't actually feel restored. I feel more tired because I'm overtaxing the part of me that's been laboring all week. And so one of the most helpful things that I've learned is to whatever part of me is working for my provision and subsistence, to let that rest on my Sabbath and allow the part of me that's been resting to work. And so most of the time, it's my body that's in need of a good work and my mind that's in need of a good rest. And so that's, again, where mowing the lawn for me becomes fun. I've got a zero turn that brings me no end of joy. And I go zipping around my property and it's not always efficient. Right? There's days where you just got to mow it, and I can mow like 2 acres in 30 minutes. And I never believed that was possible. But there's days where I'm just doing loops around trees and I'm zigzagging back and forth and seeing what kind of fun patterns I can make in the grass. There's a hill that I come up that I can get the front tires of the zero turn off the ground as I come up and just pull up on the back tires.
That's it.
He
has my attention. Yes.
It's fun. It's fun. And so I'm out there giggling like a child mowing my lawn. And that's a little taste of Sabbath for me.
And some people all of a sudden heard John say giggling like a child, and you felt uncomfortable. And if you feel uncomfortable with the idea of giggling like a child, you're not the only one. I struggle with that sometimes too. But then it's inside our heart that we don't even know how to celebrate. You don't ever have to tell a kid, stop celebrating.
No.
I mean, to celebrate, rather, is what I meant to say. It's natural. I think something that happens, and we talk about our imagination and those sort of things as we grow older, that we're missing an aspect of God when we're not able to laugh and to celebrate. You see Jesus all the time in Scripture being one who was able to celebrate. We talked about this. He wasn't at the marriage of the wedding at Cana and not having a good time.
Oh, he's having a great time.
But we were talking about this, and one of the things we were processing is that, okay, all right, we're trying to do this better. Are there times in our life where this is more of a struggle? And for me, I like that analogy. If you work with your mind, rest with your body. If you work with your body, rest with your mind. I find myself struggling more to live from that when my life becomes overwhelming. Sometimes what it's overwhelming from is my doing. Sometimes it is the reality of the job that I do. Sometimes it's the reality of other things that happen. And then all of this sort of stuff come in. And that is when actually the greatest temptation I have. Do I trust God to do for me in 6 days what the world needs to do in 7? Right? And there's no end to a list in my mind that goes like this. If I don't do this, ... right? And rarely does that list ever go, if I don't do this, well, God's going to show up.
Right. Yeah.
If I don't do this, God's going to refresh me. Now, usually, if I don't do this, what that means is, and catch this, I don't often think to myself that if I don't do this, it's going to fall through the cracks. It's actually not what I think. You might think that. What I think lots of times, if I don't do this, now I'm going to have to do 7 days work in 6. Right? I don't actually I think it's still going to be on me. I'm still just going to have to work extra hours, right? So then all of a sudden, right, if you work a 45-hour week and all of a sudden you're working 36 because you took a day off or whatever that week, then all of a sudden, so you're like, I wish I worked 45 hours. Let's talk about that for another time, right? Yeah. 36, and then like, oh, so next week I just got to work 54.
Yeah.
Right? That's not how this works. And so it's a struggle. And as you were asking me to consider some things, and John writes notes, we've talked about this before we get together for this podcast, there's some significant times in my life where I'm convinced now in retrospect that my unwillingness, misunderstanding, lack of trust, pick any of those, it could be all three at the same time sometimes, to rest and to Sabbath in the midst of that has actually made things more complicated and worse. Because I did not give God the space both to refresh me and to deal with things that frankly only God could deal with anyway.
Yeah.
And so, and part of that struggle with me, and John, I don't know if this resonates with you, I do that because I think I'm actually God when I'm not. That's probably at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
But when I do it, I don't think of it that way. I think I'm serving God. Right? I think I'm serving God. I don't want to be lazy. I don't want to, he deserves my best. And actually, God is, I said this on Sunday, and I sort of want us to hear this again, that, God is not impressed with our busyness, but he is with our obedience. Yeah. And when we have that sort of tension and, of like, I'm going to be busy, but he said to do this. And some of us are still, if you've made it this far and you're still struggling, kudos for you, right? When I say struggling, I mean not struggling to understand, but struggling with this whole very idea, because it seems the opposite of how you might be wired or what you've been taught or what you caught.
Yeah. And it's so cool to me that there's so much that God is after with the idea of Sabbath. Right? On the one hand, it's I need you to see that you can't make life work on your own. Mm-hmm. And so I'm asking you to test me by allowing for 7 days of provision to show up with 6 days of work.
Subsistence. I got it now.
There's also this element of you have to be restored. Yeah. Right? That Sabbath isn't just for the people that are weak, but no one can give from an empty cup. Mm-hmm. And most of us are running on fumes and don't even realize it because we've become so accustomed to it. Yeah. And so Sabbath is the chance for a weekly refilling because it's needed, right? It's not optional. It's actually what you need. And just because you don't feel like you need it doesn't mean you have an accurate read on that. It just means you become so accustomed to running on fumes that you're not aware of your need. It's been so long since you've been full that you don't remember what full feels like. And that's part of what God's after in Sabbath as well, is it's the internal restoration. That's why this isn't just legalism. It's not just sit quietly in the house and burn candles because you shouldn't use electricity because that's worked. Right? It's not that. It's, do you trust God to provide for you without trying to do it for yourself? Mm-hmm. Do you trust God to refill you without trying to do it yourself? You look at the number of times that the Pharisees got mad at Jesus for healing on the Sabbath. Right? Yep. And Jesus calls him on. He's like, you're completely missing the point about this. And so what are the opportunities for you as you're trying to figure out what you could do on Sabbath to Sabbath that would be healing? This is a small one, and it's not applicable for everybody. But again, I mentioned 5 acres, a ton of work to do. There was an apple tree that the former owners had planted that, as with most of the rest of our yard, had gotten just completely overgrown. And so there was one day where it felt like, there was an invitation, go and reclaim that space. And so I went out there with a little tiny pair of clippers, not little tiny, like normal sized garden clippers. And I mean, the temptation would have been like, efficiency, just knock this tree down because it wasn't huge. It wasn't massive. It's probably a 5-year-old tree. Just cut the thing off, clear cut the whole thing, plant a new tree. Boom. And instead, I spent hours clipping off vine after briar, after whatever. And it was an incredibly moving experience to restore life to something that was on the verge of death. Mm-hmm. It wasn't efficient. There were so many other things that I could have been doing with my time that would have had a larger effect. But I look at that tree now every day in my yard, and I remember the intentionality. I remember the time, the wasteful time of seeing something restored as an act of obedience, as an act of rest, as an act of not over-functioning. And again, it's a remembrance stone for me. Like, it's a living remembrance stone that as I watch that thing now thrive, or at least moving in the direction of thriving now for the last couple of years, that it reminds me of so many lessons that I learned that day.
And if you listen to this, you're like, well, that sounds awful to me. That's okay. That's not your way of Sabbathing.
It wasn't the most fun to do.
It's the heart behind what John's saying, right? And I just bring that up because that is the struggle that I would have had for so long. I would have heard John say, oh, I need to go find my version of an apple tree. Yeah. And if your version of an apple tree is listen to what God has to say, to rest and do something, yes. Yeah. But if your version of an apple tree means I need to go find a pear tree because that's all I have in my house, right? That's missing the point in that way. You know, one of the things that I've discovered is when I choose to Sabbath, take that whole day. When I choose to actually, for example, some of us need to be on vacation when we're on vacation. When that feeling of feeling full, if you have someone significant in your life, a parent, family member, spouse, if you happen to be married, and they say something like this, I don't know how to deal with vacation, Brian. It probably means you don't know how to Sabbath well. If your name's Brian, that's particularly significant. But for me, that's my name, and that would be what Kathy would say to me. Because I was a different human being. Because it was never rest, and then I had to get it all in, right? And vacation Brian's making more balanced way into normal life Brian when he's not on vacation. But I've recognized that there was a lot of things on vacation, right? I would feel in that way that God could then bring into my life of actually Sabbath. I discovered that once I watched God follow through, right, with Sabbathing, whether the end result is I'm doing something completely inefficient, like cutting a tree or pruning a tree, or just, for example, taking a walk. Right? And not a walk because I'm a particular age and I got to keep my blood pressure. I like that. Don't get me wrong. But just to take a walk for the enjoyment of it, right? That when I do those sort of things and God comes through, I discover more often than not I have less anxiety than when I started. And it's the exact opposite actually of how it should work. You're accomplishing theoretically less, so your anxiety should go up. But God comes through and I have less. And I find that, frankly, when I come back, strange enough, because we talk about efficiency too often, that it being the most important thing, I've discovered after Sabbathing on a day or breaks in a day or all of the above, that actually when I come back to what I feel like God's asking me to do in that moment, I tend to be more efficient, right? And not only do I tend to be more efficient, I tend to be more engaged mentally because, again, work with my mind, less with my body, right? And so when I go out and do those other things, it really helps. So it's something that is, I believe, both how God has wired us spiritually and emotionally, but there's a whole lot of discussion out there that's beyond certainly my pay grade around this idea of how biologically we've been created for that. I read a book years ago called The Ticking Time Bomb in the Church, written by a medical doctor who also had a degree from seminary, talking about how our rhythms work in our body and how this idea of resting is both one to show the dependence upon God, but also it's something we physically need to do to be the type of people that God wants us to be. And so wouldn't it be like God to love us enough to say you need to take a break so you can actually accomplish even greater? The things that many times what we want to do, accomplish greater things, is why we don't take a break.
Yeah, the body pays the price for our restlessness. For sure. I know some of you, again, if you've made it this long and you're wired more extrovertedly, you've heard some of these examples and gone, well, all of this sounds miserable because I don't get to talk to anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Here's one of the coolest things that I learned about Sabbath is it's communal, right? There is an invitation to connect with others as part of Sabbath, right? You look at the first Sabbath, God Sabbaths with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve Sabbath with each other and God. One of the most fun things that I've learned to do with Sabbath, we did this with a small group of our friends. We all made one of our favorite dishes, whether from childhood or from adulthood, just something we either love to cook or something we love to eat. And we made it and we did sort of a potluck thing but then we told the story of the dish, or we told the story of the meal.
I'm really staying within the story, but I got to know what you made, just for the record.
Pumpkin pie.
Pumpkin pie. There you go.
Because that's a childhood story for me.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
It's one of those stories that comes out every Thanksgiving, and I hate it.
Yeah.
But it's just, I love me some pumpkin pie too. So, but it was a cool moment of connection, right? I got to know these people that I've known well for a while in a new way, right? Parts of them that I didn't know that about you, right? Not only that you like that food, but I'd never heard that story before. And it was a leisurely meal too. That was the other fun part. Like, we didn't cram this in like in between nap time and work. It was just, we took an undetermined amount of time. Like, there was no end time other than like how people used to live. Like, well, I guess we need to go now.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like, well, it's 7:15, it's time for the next thing. Like, and so we sat and we ate and we talked and we laughed. And it was a blast.
Yeah.
And so as you're learning the Sabbath, invite people into it, and invite people into the things that you love, and invite them to invite you into the things that they love. You know, some of the examples that I heard Dan Allender give, right? Take people to a baseball game if you love baseball. Or if you have friends who just love baseball, ask them to take you to a baseball game. Not like buy your ticket for you, but like go with them and share in their delight and bask in their enjoyment.
Yeah.
Right? You have to imagine some of Adam and Eve's first Sabbath was being overwhelmed at how excited God was to show them all the stuff he just spent 6 days making.
Yeah.
I have to imagine God was a little bit giggly, if I can use that word with God and not mess with anybody's theology.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, if you think that God doesn't giggle, that's a problem, right? Because if you giggle, it's because he made you with the ability to giggle, right? And our emotive connectiveness, when we say we're made in the image of God, little theology here for us, we don't look like God. It's not like he gave us his nose, but rather that relational connection. And part of that relational connection is the emotions and the feelings he created in us that help us do that, spirit to spirit. Yeah. Whole other conversation another time. Yeah. But just in case you felt uncomfortable with that, God does not.
Yeah. But give yourself a moment to imagine God feeling like, Adam, Eve, I can't wait to show you what's around this next bend.
Yeah.
Because I made it and I know how good it is because I said it was good, but I made it for you to partake in, and you haven't seen it yet, and I can't wait for you to see this, right? Invite people to do that with you, right? The parts of your life that you geek out over, invite people in to share in your enjoyment, or ask them to share yours. Learn something new, right? That's part of Sabbath as well, right? Expanding your dominion, expanding your kingdom.
Yeah.
Right? That gets to be part of it, and that can be playful. It doesn't have to be, well, great, now I have to learn. No, but just take a moment to delight in. So as we wrap up, this would not be helpful if we only talked about what has been. And so we wanted to sort of get a taste of our own medicine and talk about what we're going to do practically. And so my wife and I were talking yesterday that we've had an ebb and flow relationship with a day of Sabbath. We've gotten really good at rhythms of Sabbath, but the commitment to a day and the intentionality of, God, I'm going to do this day with you, we've not been great at. So we cleared our Friday, and without overscheduling the day, because that'll ruin Sabbath real fast. But we each sort of picked a couple things that would feel really enjoyable. So we're going to take a walk down our country roads and just enjoy the scenery. All these things are in bloom, and we love that. And we planned a meal that we love making. Right? We love good food. We've got a bottle of wine that we've been saving, not for any particular reason, but it's just one of those, like, it's not quite good enough for your average meal, but it's like, you know what? We're going to pop that sucker open. Yeah. And we're going to enjoy something that we've been holding off on for a while. And, you know, there's a couple other things that we're going to do. But then also to continue to build on this rhythm of Sabbath, one of the things that we decided we want to do remembrance-wise is we went back and looked at the day that we moved into our new house. After all of the struggles that it took to get into it, the day that we moved in, we're going to begin to commemorate. And on that anniversary, we're going to do something special, whether it's a meal, whether it's inviting people over, whatever it is, but we're going to start to add to our rhythms of Sabbath particular moments where God has come through for us. And we're going to invite people in, and we're going to retell the story. We're going to celebrate.
Yeah. You going to have pumpkin pie? Probably should.
Probably should.
Just saying. Yeah, so some of the things, like you pick some really practical things to do, like I want to say practical, not that mine aren't impractical, very concrete. One of the things that I've been doing in getting better at my Sabbath is when I begin to feel guilty, is take my guilt to God. Like, well, John gave me something really concrete. You gave me something somewhat abstract.
Yeah.
Is because I have been Sabbathing, trying to do well with my wife, because she works Monday through Friday. I work more Sunday through Thursday, and if I'm not careful, I can work on Saturday. So how do we keep our Saturday? So we've been pretty good about that, right? What that looks like. We go to the gym together, or we take walks together. Yeah. We do that. I mean, some good stuff. Maybe pumpkin pie.
Sure.
But, there's still times I feel guilty, right? So what does it look like for me if I find myself feeling guilty that I'm being lazy, or I'm not serving others well, or I'm not serving God well by doing this, which is a lie. When you obey, you're serving God, right? We're not serving even myself well would do that. I think also some other things I've been doing is to actually real practically in the rhythms of things. So this isn't the day, this is more the rhythm, is let the phone go.
Sure.
Let the phone go, right? The temptation of not to rest. And I mean letting the phone go, that can mean lots of things for different people. But for me, it means this, is that I don't feel the tyranny of having to pick up the phone just because someone calls.
Yeah.
Right? Because I used to feel like if I don't pick up the phone, like, oh no,
bad pastor.
I'm a bad pastor, right? Or what could be happening? Well, that sort of stuff. But instead, if God has me in a moment, I'm resting, I'm celebrating, realize I can get back to that, right? And I then have to trust Him, right? That whatever happened on that voicemail, it's okay. Yeah. He's got it. And so maybe just a really practical thing. You can't be Sabbathing if you're constantly being distracted.
Yeah.
You can't. And so maybe, you're working up to a day. Maybe you're working up for that. Maybe you're just trying to find moments. What if you just said, every day for 1 hour, I'm just making up 1 hour, you turn the phone off.
Yeah.
Turn the phone off. I mean, if you feel uncomfortable, no one can track you. There's things you could do with most all your phone that says only certain people get through. Yeah. I put it on a setting on my phone, and unless you're on my speed dial, it doesn't go through. And the only people on my speed dial are people that are going to probably be at my funeral, or I'm going to be at theirs. And no offense to anyone else. Right. And so find those moments and begin to do that, because it's hard. I was amazed at how difficult it was I'm not talking about turning your phone off from 5 to 6 on Friday. I'm talking about turning your phone off or putting it on there from 10 to 11 on Tuesday or Monday or whatever, to say, all right, God, I'm going to focus specifically on you or what you have for me, right? And some of you are like, my boss would never let me do that. That's okay. Fine. We all have different places. But for me, that's one of those things.
Yeah. Healing on the Sabbath.
Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully this has been helpful. If you feel like you don't fully understand what to do yet, good. Because we're all very much in process on this one. But hopefully you feel like you have enough to start. So pick something. Pick something that sounds playful. Pick something that sounds restorative. Pick something that sounds healing. Pick something that sounds fun. Pick something that allows you to invite other people into your space or allows you to enter theirs. And just start. And then build the habit. Because that's what this is. That's what a rhythm is. It's a habit.
Yeah.
And habits take time to develop. So don't beat yourself up if it doesn't go perfectly, right? But start. And we're here for the dialogue, right? We'll be talking more about this over the next couple of weeks. And I plan to be as open as possible on how it went in the previous weeks, just because we're all in this together. So if you want to reach out and let us know what you're doing, or you need help or encouragement, or shoot us an email, faithforward@cfcwire.org. But as always, this truly is a journey. And so we're grateful that you're on this journey with us, and grateful that you've allowed us to be part of yours.
That's right. Yeah. And just remember, John turned 40 last week, and he loves pumpkin pie. And subsistence. See, I'm getting there. There you go.
So thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next week.